We are going to give folks a minute to join, and we are working with Excel Linguistics to help us translate the call today. So I'll turn it over to Julian in a minute, and he will give us instructions. And we're so grateful to have Liz Sweet with us today from MIRA. We booked this a while, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So just the timeliness of it and having it today is incredible. If this is the first time you're joining the 9:30 call, welcome. We're here 4 days a week, and would love to have you continue joining us. But I will now turn it over to Julian for our message around language interpretation.
Thank you, Amy. I'm going to, okay. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, good morning, everyone, to this 9:30 call. This morning, we have interpretation available. In just a few moments, a couple of seconds, you will see this globe icon next to the word interpretation. You will find this at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click on that globe, you can select your preferred language. If you have joined from a cell phone or tablet, look for the three dots button on your screen next to the word more. From there, you will see interpretation as an option in the list to choose your language. An important reminder, everyone has to select a language. And now I will turn it over to Jimena to repeat that in Spanish.
Buenos días, bienvenidos a la llamada de las 9:30. Esta llamada, en esta mañana vamos a tener servicios de interpretación en español. En un momento usted verá que aparecerá el icono de un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. De ahí podrá darle clic y seleccionar el español como su idioma de preferencia. Si usted se está uniendo a través de un celular o de una tableta, tiene que buscar los 3 puntitos junto a la palabra more o más, seleccionar Language Interpretation y de ahí le aparecerá una lista con el menú de idiomas para seleccionar su idioma. Es muy importante que independientemente del idioma que usted hable, por favor, seleccione uno y permanezca en el canal. Gracias.
Thank you. And so you should see now there on the bottom right-hand corner of your taskbar, it says language interpretation available. And so everyone, it's a globe as you saw, and everyone needs to pick a language. Thank you. Thank you so much to Excel Linguistics. We're so happy to continue this partnership with you. And now, Liz, welcome. As we talked about, the first question I ask everyone joining us is for you to tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be in your current role. And then we are looking forward to your update. And just folks, there are slides. We will post the slides in our follow-up folder. I will put those links in chat. We also know yesterday there was a lot of activity around an executive order about freezing federal funds. We are working to get the most up-to-date information. For right now, we know that is paused. We also know that the Mass Head Start Association set out a statement. So we will send that information as it becomes available, and just kind of grateful to have so many people working so hard to make sure that we can do our work. So Liz, I'll turn things over to you. We're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Amy. So I guess just to very briefly respond to your question about how I got involved in this work. My professional background is as an immigration attorney. I spent my first several years after law school specifically representing immigrants in immigration detention and deportation proceedings, including men, women, and unaccompanied children who were in detention. And so after 5 years of doing that, I felt very deeply that so many of our laws just aren't fair and aren't treating people with dignity. And so it turned me into more of an activist advocate. And I've been advocating for more just immigration policies ever since, and now have been MIRA Coalition's executive director for the last 3 years. So I really appreciate that so many people are interested in this information. Please, interpreters, if I'm speaking too quickly, because I know I'm trying to communicate so much information, please tell me to slow down. But I do have some slides to share, and my hope, I know we don't have a lot of time together today, but my hope is that I'm going to share a few policy updates with you all, especially on a couple of the key changes that the new administration has already made. And then I hope from there to just give a little bit of know your rights type information, and especially where you can go to get more of that know your rights information, because I'm not going to be able to go through it in the kind of detail that it deserves. All right, so just very briefly, in case you are not familiar with the MIRA Coalition, we are a membership coalition. We count more than 140 member organizations, and I'm delighted that just this past month, 6 new organizations have joined us, which I think speaks to the moment that we're in. We largely are an advocacy and organizing organization, but our staff also do citizenship application assistance, and we do a lot of civic engagement type activities, especially with immigrant communities. And our vision is very simple. It's a commonwealth and a nation where all can thrive, no matter where they came from or how they got here, and all can fully participate in their community's social, economic, and civic life. And so, to start with, we all know that there have been a flurry of executive orders and changes coming out of this administration already just a few days in. So I'm not going to go through everything. It wouldn't be possible even if I spent the whole 30 minutes talking just about policies. But do want to highlight a few that I think are especially important for people to be aware of. The first being birthright citizenship. This has already gotten a lot of attention. The fact that the new administration is attempting through executive order to basically change our constitutional law on citizenship. And so they have signed an executive order that would deny US citizenship where the mother does not have status or just has a temporary status, and also the father is not a citizen or a lawful permanent resident here. And probably you all know that a flurry of lawsuits were immediately filed on this, and a Seattle judge did already issue an injunction calling it blatantly unconstitutional. So that one is on pause, but clearly this is going to be litigated for probably the next year or so until it is resolved. So important piece to know about. Another policy change, which has gotten a little bit less attention in the public, but is one that immigration attorneys are very concerned about, is that we've always had this concept of expedited removal in immigration. And this is typically used close to border areas for individuals who've very recently arrived into the United States. The idea that they could be sent back quickly to their countries of origin rather than going through a full court process. So traditionally, if a person is arrested somewhere in the interior of the United States, such as, let's say, in, Springfield, Massachusetts, right, that person typically has the right to go before an immigration judge and to potentially make out a case to stay here. There are limited cases, but they have the opportunity, right, to go to that judge. This change dramatically changes that, and they've expanded this process to you can be picked up anywhere in the country if you've been here less than 2 years without a legal admission. And so what this means is that a lot of folks who are here with some uncertainty in their status or are completely undocumented, they're at a bigger risk of being sort of fast-tracked to deportation. And so we're advising that people start to carry documentation that shows that they've been here for at least 2 years. And that can include, all different kinds of things. It could be medical records, it could be school records, it could be mail, it could be a lease. We're putting together some suggested lists of the kind of documents that might be helpful. And if they have any evidence showing that they're already in some type of immigration process, that's also really helpful. And, folks can just take photos of all this and keep it on their phones. But it is really important that they have that kind of documentation available. Okay. Another really significant policy change is that, especially under the Biden administration, a number of different parole policies were put into place. Parole, for example, to allow individuals to come into the US from Haiti, from Venezuela, from various countries. The Ukraine program got a lot of attention, Uniting for Ukraine. And now the Trump administration is basically ending all of these parole policies. And what is a little bit unclear right now is it definitely means that anyone applying for parole now, they're not going to get it. The uncertainty is folks that are here with parole. We don't quite know how that's going to play out yet. So unfortunately for us here in Massachusetts, there are a lot of folks, especially from Haiti, but also from some other countries, who are currently here with parole status. And so we hope that the status they've been given, that they can continue to rely on, but there's a little bit of uncertainty around this. We've obviously all been hearing a lot about immigration raids and enforcement, and I'm going to talk in a moment more about rights in that situation. But we do want to highlight a couple of areas where there already are changes in the level of immigration enforcement, where immigration can enforce, and against what targets. And so previously, under our immigration policy, it wasn't law, but it was policy, immigration had to respect sensitive locations. So that included houses of worship, churches and synagogues and mosques. It included our schools, hospitals, so many key community spaces. And they have rescinded this. So now the guidance for immigration is that they can go and carry out actual enforcement activities, even in sensitive locations, which is incredibly disturbing. In addition to that, I'm so sorry to be the bearer of so much bad news.
No, we're grateful that you're here, Liz.
In addition to that, in the past, there was some guidance around, let's look at priority people for immigration enforcement. And the priorities under the previous administration was that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, would specifically seek out individuals who perhaps have some type of criminal record, and have some uncertainty in their immigration status. They've completely taken away these priorities. And so I think this slide says it really well. The working mom who's been here for 20 years is an equal target now to a human trafficker or a drug dealer. So, this idea that basically any person who is undocumented in this country is an equal target for ICE is a really dramatic change. And then, of course, we are hearing various rumors about raids. We've already heard of ICE activity in certain areas here in Massachusetts. So far, ICE is saying that that's connected to targeting folks who have some type of criminal activity in their past, but we don't have any real solid information. And obviously, because of these new memos, it is certainly possible that they could be targeting lots of different folks. Okay. One thing that we do want to lift up right now at MIRA is that we are hearing a lot of rumors. And so we do really encourage that if you see ICE and ICE activity, that you stop to try to verify that you document what you can before you share, because there are a lot of rumors spreading and a lot of fear in communities. And so I have some information here. We have more information on our social media about how to do this if you want to be prepared to document this kind of activity. But knowing we don't have a lot of time, I do want to make sure we turn to a little bit about immigration enforcement and people's rights. And I'm pretty sure that I have more information than I have time for. So I'm gonna probably skip through a few slides, but I do think it's important to very briefly understand that most of our enforcement activities are, so everything around our immigration system falls under the Department of Homeland Security, and specifically the enforcement arm is ICE, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So they are responsible for enforcement, detention, deportation, and actually represent the Department of Homeland Security in all of the immigration court proceedings against immigrants where they are attempting to deport folks. I won't talk about the other agencies just for now. People can come into contact with ICE quite a few ways. That can be because they have some type of contact with our criminal system. That can include just a police stop or an arrest that doesn't actually lead to a conviction. That those can sometimes be ways that folks come to immigration's attention. Obviously, if someone puts themselves forward to apply for a benefit, they can come to immigration's attention. When folks travel outside of the US and then come back in, they're putting themselves forward. And then, of course, now, especially, we're concerned about these raids and targeted enforcement. And the disturbing reality that some people don't realize is that anyone who's not a US citizen can face some kind of risk of deportation. So even someone who has a green card and has been here for a long time, there are at times ways that that person could lose their status. Usually that is a criminal charge or some type of fraud in their application or something like that. But sometimes people don't realize that even though they have some type of status, they could be at some risk. And folks with less status, such as non-immigrants or folks with a temporary status, can be at even more risk, of course. So know your rights. I put this link here. I know that
I added to the chat as well.
perfect. If I can give you one message, it is to go to this page and check out our Know Your Rights resources, because there's a lot. And what is especially we're proud of at MIRA is that at this point, all of our Know Your Rights materials are minimally available in English, Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Portuguese. And we have several documents now available in Chinese. We have a few documents coming in Cape Verdean Creole and some other languages in the works as well. So we're really trying to reach as many communities as possible. But I'm gonna hit just a couple of highlights of some of the rights that folks have.
And Liz, as you're going through this, I'll just ask 930 callers to A, share appreciation for Liz in the chat. B, I know people have lots of specific questions. So Liz, I'm also wondering if we can think about or help partner with, or you already are doing it, kind of a like, what happens if kind of session. Because I think people have questions like, what if a family childcare provider is, we also have heard about updating people's contact information, because in good times it can be hard to contact families, right? So just making sure of that. So I know people have questions like that. And so let's think about ways that we can continue to partner and get this information out. So I just wanted to address that and without chatting it. And then I put also, this call is being recorded in English and Spanish. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you so much, Amy. So just to go through a few quick highlights. First of all, there are certain basic rights that every single person has under the US Constitution when you are in this country, completely regardless of immigration status. And you can only assert those rights if you know about them. So that's why it's so important to us that we're getting this information out. I love the idea of setting up some kind of follow-up session where we can dig more into some of this, because some of it is complicated, especially the first time you hear about it. So one really powerful resource that we always point out is these things called red cards. They're made by another organization, not by MIRA, but we always lift them up because they're terrific. I'm so sorry. I seem to be slightly losing my voice. Let's see. So one of the basic rights that we all have is to the right to remain silent. We all, regardless of immigration status, can choose and assert that right to remain silent when interacting with law enforcement. But for any of us who've ever been pulled over by a cop or anything that you've dealt with, it's hard in the face of law enforcement to assert your rights sometimes. And so these red cards are wonderful because on one side, they're in various languages, so whatever language someone needs. And the other side, it basically says, I'm asserting my right to be silent, I want to speak to an attorney, etc. And so people can just pull that out and hand it to someone. And so we've put the link there to order them. You can also find a link on
I
MIRA.
just added it to chat, but when I looked, it said they were temporarily out of stock, but they have templates that you can make your own. As early educators, we can make our own.
Wonderful. Thank you. So highly advise giving these out and people carrying them as much as possible. A couple brief pieces. If immigration comes to a home, and this really goes for anything that's private property, right? If immigration comes to the door, we advise that you do not immediately open the door, because you only need to open the door to law enforcement if they show you a warrant signed by a judge. And so our advice is to ask to see that warrant. If you have one of those Know Your Rights cards, you can provide that to them and say that you are asserting your right to remain silent and to speak to an attorney. And again, this is labeled as coming to a home, but it really is true for any private setting. So very briefly, how do you know that it's a warrant? You want to look for something that states someone's name, you know, who is at that location and is actually signed by a judge. That's really how you know that it is a valid judicial warrant. And so we have a very quick example here. On the left-hand side, you can see a valid warrant. It's from a US District Court. It has in the matter of a name up in that top corner, and then at the bottom, it's signed and clearly marked US Magistrate Judge, versus the document on the other hand is from the Department of Homeland Security. It is not from a judge. Okay. Similarly, if immigration or police stops a person in public, again, that person always has the right to remain silent and say that they want to speak to an attorney. I've had the question when I've done this presentation in other settings, like, do you need an attorney that you already have on retainer or something like that? And no, you can just say you want to speak to an attorney. They're not going to provide you an attorney, but you can call and try to reach an attorney. Okay. We also do advise that folks do carry immigration documents, and I mentioned earlier carrying also that documentation about having been here for a couple of years. Let's see, I'm going to move forward through this, but do want to just flag also we have so many mixed status families here in Massachusetts,
Right.
where there are individuals, you know, parents who may be at some risk of deportation with citizen children. That is very, very common. And so for families to make family preparedness plans and think through what kind of decisions they would want to make in the risk of them being arrested or deported is so important. And there's some links here and on our Know Your Rights page with packets to help people prepare with this kind of information. So it includes safety planning, thinking ahead about rights and what needs your child would have, and potentially thinking through reunification plans. You know, some parents choose, if they are deported, to have their kids come back to the country with them. Others want to make arrangements with other family members, or etc. So the more families think this through in advance, the better. It's sobering, but it is a reality. I only have a couple more slides. We're
Great. You're doing great, Liz.
I also recognize that some of you are from workplaces where you may have people in some different statuses. And so I've gotten the question even from some nonprofit organizations about what happens if ICE comes to our workplace. And similarly, as what I spoke about with the home, there is this question of what areas are private versus what areas are public. So ICE can come to a public space, right? So if you have, I'm trying to think of a good example. If you have like a church type building where there is a part of it that is fully open to the public, it's
Right.
never locked, etc. It's very hard to say that ICE can't come into that, right? But you may have, say, some of the church offices that you do consider to be private space. That's just an example. It's very much based on your practice, right? But if you are able to mark private spaces, then ICE cannot come into those, again, absent that warrant. So we encourage you to make a plan of how you would respond in the case of a raid. And again, we have a link here for where you can get more information about how to make these kinds of plans and sort of think in advance about how you would respond in a raid situation.
Right.
Finally, just a couple last resources I want to highlight. I obviously have spoken a little bit about consulting with lawyers, so these are a few links to some of the legal service providers here in Massachusetts. There are more, and there certainly are many excellent private attorneys as well, but these are some of the free resources. And as an advocacy organization, I would be remiss if I did not also lift up to you all
Absolutely.
that we are advocating as well as we can here in Massachusetts, besides providing all this Know Your Rights. We are launching a campaign actually today, later at the State House, our Protecting Our Immigrant Communities campaign. We are lifting up a number of bills that we think could help better protect our immigrant communities here in Massachusetts. A Safe Communities Act, which would hopefully better separate out our local law enforcement from immigration enforcement, and an Immigration Legal Defense Act that asks for state investment in immigration legal services, so that when folks go to court, they are getting access to representation and then access to a little more fairness in their proceedings.
Liz, thank you. I can't thank you enough, especially really appreciate your speed of what you presented. We know the interpreters are keeping up. Lots of interest in maybe doing a session, a longer session where we can kind of come armed with the questions that you received. We'll send you the full chat. The slides, all slides are available from the 9:30 call, as well as on our YouTube channel. So I put the links in chat. But if you go to Strategies for Children, the 9:30 call website, you'll see on the right-hand side, there's a navigation of like, check out the schedule, see the recordings. I think, Liz, all the links that you shared are in your slides. So we'll post it as a PDF. So all those links will be live. The other thing we're thinking, I haven't even told the SFC team this, but putting a spreadsheet in the advocacy headquarters part of the 9:30 call follow-up, because information is changing so quickly, we want to add links with dates and keep it running so that you can go to the most accurate information. So we'll be developing that as well. I think most importantly, if you have any questions or you want more information or you want to confirm something, please reach out to our team at Strategies for Children. We appreciate, Liz, your time this morning. We know that you are probably in high demand. And how big is MIRA? How big is your staff?
We have 32 staff at MIRA.
Right. So that's a lot of people, but not probably enough to do all the work that you have to do. And so we do appreciate, especially you as the executive director, joining us this morning. And we will be in touch about planning another kind of, if that works for you, and it could be a member of your team, to kind of go through the questions that we received today, and then thinking about, a lot of questions, and you answered about what happens when somebody comes to your door, what happens to children, if a family child care, there's a question about that, if a family child care provider is detained, what happens to the children? So I'm sure you probably have answers to all of this. So we will continue to plan a longer event. 9:30 callers, thank you so much for joining us. We had 280 people on the call this morning. And so we know people also want to do the right thing. They want accurate information so they can help everybody make good decisions. So we will be here tomorrow morning on the 9:30 call with Jacques Payton, who is been working to help support family childcare providers and financial planning. So please join us then. If you are not signed up for the weekly email, every week we send the schedule, especially if you're newer to the call. So sign up for that. You'll get the schedule and the Zoom link, and everybody is always welcome on the 9:30 call. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate the invitation.
Okay, we will see you soon, and we will see everyone. And thank you to Excel Linguistics. Please to show some love for them as well in the chat.
Thank you,
Julian, thank
Amy.
you and your team. All right, we will see everyone tomorrow morning at 9:30.